Well, here's another one. As you've seen from the title again,
Yes.
we are going to talk about two things and very important ones.
So the very first thing that we are actually going to discuss is, although we did touch a little bit on the political side of things, but apparently a lot of people are actually saying that the Joker film is glorifying violence, not just glorifying it, but legitimizing killing people, so that when if you disagree with someone, it is okay to kill them. Right, so these concepts are being forwarded by the film, and people are questioning whether or not it's okay.
And that's exactly the Rotten Tomatoes controversy. The fact that that's why the reviews kind of dropped based on this controversy, that it's glorifying violence and everything. So, but to be honest, then the question comes down to is, then isn't John Wick doing it as well? Isn't Deadpool doing it as well? Why? Why not them? Why this film?
Not only that, it's a rehash of this whole debate that, oh, so video games cause violence. Well, replace video game with any kind of art. Let's say, do books glorify violence? Do movies glorify violence? Well, life has violence in it.
Yes.
The point being that we can't simply just say, oh, so we can censor all of these things and stop them, and suddenly, oh, shield the eyes of the people and it will no longer exist. That's not how this works.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely believe that it is something that should be up for discussion, and this film opens that discussion, but a healthy one should be the one that we need, not a one in which we kind of bash each other up. I would say that, to be honest, this film, from what we've seen, my perspective at least, Kaswar, is it does not glorify violence. You slightly sympathize with a guy, but up to a certain point.
Yes.
After that, you're not sympathizing with him. You're actually depressed and sad to see him succumb to darkness.
Yes.
The fact that you actually feel sad for this guy. You thought he might go to the positive side, but the moment you see him going into the darkness, you feel sad.
Just to point this small thing out here, but there a little bit of the actual movie is also concentrated on the idea of the American dream. The idea being that if he works hard enough, he can make it in the big city. It's a huge part of this ordeal that everyone faces. If everyone thinks that if they work hard enough, they can make it. And clearly in this circumstance, we see that although the Joker was trying hard to be a comedian, he simply was not.
It's the fact that
Yes.
it's the sum of everything. It's the sum of internal circumstances and external circumstances that make him do what he does. Keep in mind that it's a mentally ill person. Keep in mind that everything that's happening around him is a series of unfortunate events but are happening back to back. And then with it, the addition of the internal mental health rising. So yeah, I mean, all these emotional circumstances are just, they're not stopping. Everything's going bad.
So we are now actually going to try and discuss the second part of this video, which is the ending.
Yes, I mean, and I think the ending truly deserves a little bit of more in-depth discussion, because although we did it in our spoiler review, and I would say Kaswar definitely has a great perspective on this, but the ending is it done in such a way in the film that it is very open to interpretation, and I see a different perspective to it.
Like we said before, it's an indie film. It's an indie-esque film.
Yes.
And because of that, indie films are often more open to interpretation rather than,
Yeah, it
more
makes you
mainstream
think.
stuff.
The film makes you think. And well, in this one, I would like to tell what I think, and that is, if you clearly remember in the scene, is that the moment when he's laughing and the psychologist asks him what's so funny, and when he's laughing and suddenly a cut happens of you seeing Bruce Wayne in the alley with his parents dead, Thomas Wayne and the missus, and you see Bruce Wayne alone in the alley, and then it cuts back and you see the Joker saying, I just remembered a funny joke, you won't get it. The fact that there's a reason why it cut to that scene, I have a feeling, my perspective is because by the time he's there in the psychologist in the session, he's gotten the news that Thomas Wayne and Martha Wayne have died. And because they have died in that whole anarchy that was happening at that moment, the event, you feel that the Joker is quite satisfied. He's quite happy about the effect. He's quite happy about the fact that because he had a gripe with Thomas Wayne, he sees that his revenge or his whatever he was set out to do is successful, is completed. And he feels that, oh, the rich finally have to face what I have faced. And that is, Bruce has to face what I have faced. That is being traumatized. Because the Joker, you remember, he was traumatized by learning his mother was the one who let
Him be abused.
Yeah, him be abused in his childhood. So it's kind of like, oh, I have gotten the trauma. I was in the lower class of society. It's time for the higher class to get their part. And I think that's where he's kind of enjoying that perspective of, oh, I did it. I did it.
So just discussing this small idea of the rich versus the poor, especially as when it turns into Joker versus Batman, as Batman being rich and Joker being from the poor idea.
It's just the same thing, I think, has now been equalized, but in two parts of society. And that's where I think the joke, he's just like, you won't get it.
Yes.
The parallel. Oh, that's what I think.
Yeah. So, well, of course, anybody who's listening to this, you might have a different perspective than we do. It's perfectly fine. Everyone has different perspectives on movies themselves, which is why it's art.
So definitely do look out for other videos as well, other spoiler reviews if you have watched the film. It is definitely a film worth discussing. So thanks so much for listening again. So I think I thank you once more, Mr. Kaswar.
Not a problem, Hassan. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, and I know how glad he is because he's telling me let's go watch the film again. So yes, we are going again, I think. Okay, take care guys. Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.